Chapter 2. How Reynard appeared before King Noble. There was a very long murmur. Everyone realised then that the audience was divided, but that admiration and sympathy were much stronger than rancour and hostility. The appearance of Reynard, his boldness, the graceful lightness of the leap which had brought him before Noble, the ease of his bearing, and the brightness of his eyes spoke in his defence before he had uttered a word, and everyone could also see that Noble's august face bore an undeniable expression of goodwill. "What do my enemies here allege?" asked Reynard. "They want to convict me of every crime. They allege that wickedness, deceit, imposture, cruelty, and lasciviousness are my usual vices. Your Majesty, I rely on you. The accusation is so unfounded, supported only by the violence of this bare-tailed bawler, this long-jawed plaintiff with the hard paws of a ragamuffin, this coward who attacks only the weak, that I would blush before you to plead the cause of Reynard, as an accused prisoner obliged to defend himself might do. Just look at us, at him and me. What recourse would I have, I who am so small, against these teeth and the strength of these shoulders? If, your Majesty—" Noble smiled and turned his eyes towards Reynard. Amusement and curiosity were so obvious in his large eyes, and so clearly revealed to the fox, that he was encouraged in his audacity. Therefore he began to speak again, and he spoke at even greater length than Isgrim, and irrespective of what he might have said, he defended himself, but with such verve, such cheerful insolence and energy that even his victims, when he was mocking them, were forced to mingle their laughter with those of a unanimously hilarious gathering, but rancour seethed in their hearts. First of all, Reynard described himself as a young, naive, innocent, somewhat conventional fox, and he made everyone laugh at his own expense. What he omitted from his adventures was not worth a brass farthing. He had been cheated by Chanticleer the cock, laughed at by the fat Chippet, taken in by the farmer who broke his word, robbed of the ham by the wolf, pushed into the trap by Tibbert and done out of his share of the sausage. Pincher's beak had nipped him, Redbeak had tickled his whiskers, Tinker the Sparrow had provoked him and drawn him towards Surly's jaws. He had been hunted, tricked and bullied. What a comical hero he was, and how freely the whole gathering laughed when they heard him recount his own misadventures. But they should have been wary, for this was not the whole of Reynard. He did not mention the great oath that he had sworn at Malpas before Ermelin and his sons. He revealed himself gradually. He was continually amusing and charming. His speech was so clever that his most daring tricks seemed to be harmless jokes, his most daring crimes the just revenge of an innocent animal. What was the drowning of a peasant, if it was useful to King Noble? Who among those present was not gladdened by the death of Outram Rufus, the poacher of the plain and the wood? They went on laughing, and then came the story of the three tales. Reynard told his story, and everyone could visualise it. Isgrim fishing with his tail through the hole, where it was soon to be caught and held by the ice. Tibbert laughed. Bruin the bear laughed. Next came Julia, clinging to the bear's tail, and Lanfert chopping it off with his axe. Then it was the turn of the cat and the wolf to laugh. But when Reynard finally described how he let the iron-bound lid fall on the master cat's tail, he suddenly stopped and excused himself so delightfully that Tibbert, from his high branch, raised his paw and murmured, "It was nothing," his heart full of anger and his eyes of hate. But who noticed it, in fact? Everyone laughed. King Noble laughed, so did Bamber, and Grimbart, and Bruin the bear, and Snorter, and the gloomy Besant. Long live Reynard! He was full of confidence, however, and recounted his jests one after the other, living them again, miming them one after the other, narrating his own exploits in dance and song. Hear about Reynard the fox, who caused Isgrim to be beaten in the race by Slowcoach the snail, who made the dog chase the wolf all night, and that very same night made the wolf chase the dog. What could one say now about the game with the rams, or the fox hiding among the skins, or the well of the Carmelite monks at Tyrone, where Reynard— Laughter rang out so loudly and cheerfully that Reynard became gradually intoxicated with it. The gay creature enjoyed success. It was the chink in his armour, the very spot where his skin chafed him. Fortunately for him, his instinct, in its astute and wily way, remained awake and always kept one eye open. He stopped, looked round, and reflected. The intoxication which dazzled him would have made him brave things further, and just at that moment a little shiver warned him, and a slight chill ran down his spine. He looked round with surprise. Where was Eastgrim? He found himself alone on the sunny arena, for the wolf had disappeared. Where was Tibbet, who had been lying on the branch? He was no longer there. What did this mean? He interrupted himself and stopped short. "Your Majesty," he said, "you have listened to me most graciously, and I now conclude. Would you allow me to be abandoned without defence to the designs of a churlish wolf who is foolish or crazed enough to come and proclaim here, to my detriment, a tale which brings shame upon him, a tale which no one would ever believe? Let Lady Ursula come and swear before you that her husband has spoken the truth, and that I, Reynard, shamed her, when in fact she was caught between two trees and held so tightly that she could not move, while I was expending my feeble strength in the hope of freeing this worthy and powerful lady." King Noble was more and more amused. More and more he admired the little fox's astute impudence, his daring, his high spirits, and a certain secret toughness, which consisted both of violence and courage. Lady Ursula was still close to Besant, hiding behind his enormous thighs. She was ashamed of herself and suffered 1,000 deaths, for Reynard had not spared her. While he uttered denials in a puritanical voice, he winked with gleaming eyes which suggested the contrary of what he was saying. Why did he not notice that the wise Grimbart, his faithful cousin, was becoming gradually alarmed, until he stepped forward and tried to catch his eye? In the end, the badger could restrain himself no longer. "Your Majesty," he murmured quietly. "Your Majesty." The lion heard, and with a look encouraged him to go on. This dispute was becoming tedious to him. He was as much concerned about the wolf's honour and his mate's virtue as about his first kill. Boredom, which weighs so heavily on the great, returned suddenly to King Noble. That is what Grimbart had felt. This was the danger from which he wanted to save his dear Reynard. He had perhaps noticed other things also, and he thought that they bode no good. He was about to speak, but it was too late. Tibbet the cat, his eyes half closed, jumped silently up to his branch and lay down on it again, and the ranks of the assembly parted. A growing murmur came closer, and Eastgrim, panting, with the light of victory in his eyes, reappeared on the sunny arena, looked up, and raised his outcry once more.